training camp 2020 is here, albeit different than what we expected or what we've seen, and absent of fans, but here nonetheless, and a bright spot for football fans, to say the least. Joining us now to talk about that is our friend Larry Holder of The Athletic. NOLA does an outstanding job for that excellent entity, and we encourage you to check them out and subscribe. Larry, always a pleasure. Welcome to the show.
Hey, Ken. What's up, buddy? How are you?
Doing fine, thanks. And I mentioned training camp. This is unusual that we find ourselves immersed in the strange times we do, but the fact that they're going to get started, it does appear, brings some sense of normalcy, maybe even relief to us, doesn't it?
I'd say a little bit of relief for sure, because we were kind of getting down to the negotiating, and it doesn't matter the topic. Players and owners, of course, they will have some sort of negotiations to go down with this. But look, it sounds like that training camp is going to be a go, and you mentioned how different it's going to be, and I think fans, they keep hearing, the testing and this, that, and the other, but I think fans also have to realize that it is not, say, starting Thursday practice like it would normally be in a normal training camp, and they would just go practice and move forward. I mean, it is basically a condensed off-season, smashing it into about 5 or 6 weeks, where this type of training and what they would be doing would be spanned starting, say, in late April and going all the way to the season. It's basically conditioning, then you smash in some OTA practices, and then you don't get till padded practices until August 17th. So this is definitely not the training camp where if you're looking for constant updates of plays by the end of this week, you're going to be disappointed because they're not going to be coming for another couple of weeks.
From the standpoint of how it's reported, talk about that challenge, because that, too, is impacted by what's going on right now.
Right. Fans are typically used to watching, if you can't get out to training camp practices, which a lot of people do. Look, fans are not going to be at training camp practices, which means that it's the way it's reported, it won't be kind of live. It will happen in blocks after practice, and so it's definitely going to be reported differently. And just in general, this season, I mean, it's not going to be just training camp, but look, for reporters, locker rooms are going to be closed throughout the season. That's the impression I'm receiving, and it will be something to where reporters are going to have to be a little creative in the way they're they do some of their storytelling and that sort of thing. And so that's just something that, in our industry and the public consumption of the team, I mean, it's just going to be different. And so I think I will take it. I'll be honest with you. Like us as football people who are in the business and make a living off of this, we'll take it any way we can get it at this point, just because, look, the virus obviously is still the boss of how we do things, and we're learning that by the minute, considering what's going on with Major League Baseball the last 24 hours.
Visiting with Larry Holder of The Athletic. NOLA, 260-1061 to join us. Before we talk Saints specifically, what about the NFC and the contenders? You have to put San Francisco there, of course. I think you have to put Seattle there. Most people would certainly include Green Bay. I think you probably have people looking at Dallas as being an NFC contender as well. The Saints are obviously part of that. That's 5 right there. Is that a list for you? And would you add someone else like a Minnesota or a Philadelphia? Do you see those 5 being the primaries, or who else do you see being genuine contenders for NFC honors?
I'm going to add Tampa. I mean, you go get Tom Brady and Rob Gronkowski, and look, I think that team was getting better. They're getting better on the defensive side of the ball, and so I've got to put Tampa in there. Tom Brady is easily better, at least more more protective of the football than Jameis Winston, and then you add a familiar weapon to a bunch of already potent weapons offensively over there, and I've got to put them up there. But I would say that the 49ers have to be the biggest threat in the NFC. And if you just go look at odds makers, and I saw a set of odds that got sent to me today to where the Saints and 49ers are basically neck and neck as the favorites in the NFC. And so, you always have some sort of surprise contender. What if you mentioned the Eagles? What if they pop up and get it together and like they did a couple of years ago to go win a Super Bowl? And but yeah, look, I would say, and maybe the Rams jump back in this mix. Seattle is always going to be there with Russell Wilson. They just added Jamal Adams. But I'm looking Green Bay too, and you're wondering if Minnesota can kind of keep that progression going with another year with Kirk Cousins, and without Stephon Diggs as he's now at Buffalo. But I'm looking squarely at San Francisco as really the Saints' biggest threat in the NFC.
Which, of course, was really the case last year. That game that was played in the Dome, I think, pretty much decided the NFC Championship. The fact that the Saints had to play an opening round game changed everything. They were beat up, especially up front. It showed. They did get outplayed and outcoached, but I think the health issue was big. Getting the bye was gigantic, and it all went back to that game against the 49ers. Some would say, well, it really was about losing to the Falcons at home, and that's true, but everybody throws one of those in there every year. The fact is the Saints took the lead on San Francisco late. All they needed was one stop, couldn't get it. The end result, well, we saw it.
Yeah, and look, you're right. They have the stinker every year. Like, even when they have a good season, they have that stinker every year, and you bring up the Falcons game. That helped save Dan Quinn's job. One of the wins, they went on a big run. And I'm curious to see how Atlanta kind of responds. But, yeah, look, I think that the Saints probably overall played their worst game in the playoffs. And we can make all the excuses there is, this, that, and the other, but they just, to me, came out flat. And I'm not going to have that as the overwhelming indictment on this team going into this season. You don't win 13 games again by accident. They're one of the best rosters in the NFL. To me, all you got to do is, you could say the NFL top 100 list on NFL Network is silly, but Saints are among, if not, I think, tied with the most players on that list. But that's legitimate. And, you could go through, and I've done my annual top 20 players list. I've been doing the list since 2014, back when I was at the Picayune, and I've continued that with the Athletic. And as the years have gone on, it's become increasingly difficult to trim it to 20 because the roster has been so deep. And, that's not lip service anymore. That's not like us leaving 2013 and going into 2014 and saying, oh, my gosh, this team's really good. Well, no. This team has proven that they're good, and they've gotten pieces and fixed some flaws. You mentioned the offensive line. Look, they fixed them. They're trying to fix some of the flaws there and improve to be an even better team this year.
Of course, they took care of business with getting all the draft picks on the dotted line, so no distraction there. No surprise. They typically do a good job with getting that accomplished. Of course, it's all slotted, but still, it avoids any potential distraction.
Right. And, it's one of those storylines that really doesn't exist anymore just because of the slotting. And I just think, though, that with the more prevalent storyline maybe with the rookies is, all right, where do we put Cesar Ruiz? We know he's going to start, but where is he going to start? Lack of reps early on in this offseason could play a factor in that, whether you keep him at center or move him to guard and stick with Eric McCoy at center. You're also wondering, all right, lack of field time with Zach Vaughn and Adam Troutman, probably going to hinder them playing a whole ton right away. And then the enamorment with Tommy Stevens, is he going to be Taysom Hill 2.0? So you add that, and it's really an uphill battle for the undrafted rookies, more so than back when in 2011 when there was a lockout and they didn't have an off season until really training camp, and so that's it's going to be more difficult than ever for rookies to really get acclimated and really get kind of neck deep into having to have some really good playing time or to make a roster the way this offseason is structured.
And the Saints have done as good a job, if not a better job, than everybody in the league at identifying undrafted rookie talent. We've seen it continuously. Guys that have emerged last year, Deontay Harris. He wasn't even supposed to be that guy. They acquired a guy to be their return guy. He got hurt. Didn't happen. Harris steps in. He's first-team All-Pro. And, of course, we all know about Willie Snead. We know about Pierre Thomas, Lance Moore. I could go on and on. There always seems to be one of those guys, if not two of those guys. That might be hard-pressed to find a guy like that under these circumstances this year.
Yeah, and it was, if you think back to 2011, the only undrafted rookie I can recall that made that roster was Issa Abdul Kudus. And I remember it because it's he's not some great player, but he's just someone that I just remember how difficult that offseason was for any of the undrafted rookies to make it because of the shortened span. And so when you look at it in that sense, it would definitely be an uphill battle. Now, I do think that some undrafted rookies will have a decent shot. And if you look at some of the roster projections, myself and my colleague Catherine Terrell, we have up at The Athletic, we posted today that I looked at a couple of position groups like an offensive line or a linebacker group that guys could kind of maybe get in there. I think it'll be a little bit more difficult maybe for receivers to kind of get in that mix because you could use some games. I think, say, interior defensive linemen, it's going to be a challenge because like a guy like Shai Tuttle and a guy like Taylor Stallworth, they really needed games to get in there. But I think someone like Joe Bocci, undrafted guy from Michigan State, could really have a good shot at making it as a linebacker just because of the uncertainty at linebacker, given the only really known and stable commodity that they have right now is DeMario Davis.
Which is why I think Zach Bond's going to play early, and I think he'll end up being a starter this year, if not out of the gate early on, because he is that kind of guy that can play three downs, much like Davis with his skill set and his ability to rush the passer and play in space. So I think all their draft picks will make the team, Stevens included. And, again, I think it'll be tough for undrafted rookies to break through, but we'll be watching. As far as the question marks on this team are concerned, to me, they all exist on defense. The question mark on offense is one you brought up earlier. Who's going to play center? Who's going to play guard? Other than that, I don't think there's any question mark on offense. On defense, it's all about will Rankins and Davenport be healthy and what will their level of play be? And the linebacking core, I mentioned Bond, and then the relative health of Anzalone and Alonso and whether they'll be healthy and or stay healthy. And then in the deep, to me, it's all about Marcus Williams. It's a contract year for him, and it's sink or swim. He either steps up and becomes a more consistent player or might not be here next year like Avon Bell. Just talk a little bit about the defensive question marks that this team has.
Let's start with Marcus Williams, and he's someone who, boy, at times he could look really good in pass coverage, and then when a big play happens, sometimes he can get exposed. I mean, that's kind of the nature of being that free safety. But I do think that part of the frustration is less about that and more about the tackling issues. And this past season, he had his most missed / broken tackles of his career, double digits. It's the first time that's happened in his career. And, it feels like we're so used to him missing on a tackle. It's like that he throws that shoulder like in the Minneapolis Miracle that it's hard for a lot of people to let that go. And when they keep seeing it more and more, it aggravates them more than more. So, it is definitely a sink or swim year for him just because there are other contracts that people are going to be looking at that are up immediately, let's say like an Alvin Kamara, DeMario Davis, those that are up immediately. And so, I'm curious to see how they deploy C.J. Gardner-Johnson. Is he going to be their down in, down out nickel corner. I'm curious because he can be so versatile, and you have two starting safeties on your roster right now with Marcus Williams, and you're going to have Malcolm Jenkins really be that Von Bell role. It's almost like, do you think he could be, C.J. Gardner-Johnson can be a better Kenny Vaccaro in that role? And think back to when they first drafted him in 2013, you had Malcolm Jenkins and Roman Harper, and Kenny Vaccaro played a ton. So I'm curious to see how they kind of use him in a versatile role there. You mentioned the linebackers. Someone like Zach Bond, if he can really pick up on it, because he wasn't necessarily a 4-3 traditional linebacker at Wisconsin. I'm curious to see how quickly he picks it up. But, boy, they really think he can. And he thinks he can, too. And, if he's on the field, he's a playmaker. And that's something that the Saints could really use. And, you're looking also at the health of Alex Anzalone and Kiko Alonso. I'm sure they still have some promise in Caden Ellis, too. And I mentioned someone I think is a sleeper. There's someone like Joe Bocci, and then go to the defensive line. And we all know Cam Jordan's going to be Cam Jordan. Marcus Davenport, all eyes are going to be on him. And it's kind of funny that a lot of people zero in more on him than Sheldon Rankins. But Sheldon Rankins is the one who's in a contract year and has really been banged up. Marcus Davenport has missed a few games in these first 2 years, and I thought he played better last year than a lot of people give him credit for. I'm curious to see if Davenport can take that next step. And if, say, someone like Shai Tuttle can see more snaps in the inside. And, a lot of eyes are certainly going to be on Rankins. David Onyemata's got a 3-year deal, so he's secure for the next couple of years at least. Rankins and Davenport are definitely the big question marks along that defensive front.
I know they would like to have added another piece on that defensive line of substance, especially outside, but couldn't. Trey Hendrickson has proven when healthy he can play a solid role, so they have that as well. A lot of people make much about the linebacker situation, and yet it's not as big of a concern. The health issue would be for me, but in terms of numbers, it's really not a concern because of the fact that they play so many defensive sets with just two linebackers. In fact, the preponderance of what they do now is really done with two linebackers. And you mentioned Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. Well, he fills that role because he can tackle too. So realistically, most of the time you're only talking about two linebackers.
Right, and if we're talking, say, Malcolm Jenkins playing almost a safety linebacker hybrid role that he's really kind of played a lot in Philadelphia. He moved away from that free safety role that he was playing a lot with the Saints back in his career. You could see maybe Jenkins play that role in some packages, not all the time, but in some. And I just think, and I harp on linebacker just because I don't know who that number 2 guy even is, much less their third guy in a base defense, which base defense you don't play much of anymore. But I just don't even know who that number 2 guy is. So I kind of harp on that in that sense. But definitely got a number 1. I mean, Demario Davis, you could say he's one of if not the best free agent pickups in all of football the last couple of years, the way he's really blossomed in this and a bona fide first team All-Pro. I mean, that's totally legit. And so, but I think they can figure that out. If the bodies they have are healthy, they actually will have really good choices. Because when Anzalone's healthy, he can play well. Alonso, when he's healthy, he can certainly tackle and be in the mix. So it's something that if some of those guys could just stay healthy, that question mark is really eliminated. But it's more about the lack of healthy bodies on a consistent basis that should be a little bit of a concern.
Yep, and Caden Ellis is a guy we can't forget about because they liked him last year before the injury. Also, $1 million question. I don't know if you have a take on it, but it seems most everybody seems to think this is it for Breeze, that he's not going to play that second year of the contract. Do you get that sense as well, or is that simply premature?
I'm going under that assumption that this is going to be it for Drew Brees. He could certainly change his mind, but the way I just look at the way that they structured with Taysom Hill, they figured, all right, we'll pay him $4 million this year and then $16 million next year, and that's a little bit below what you would pay, say, a bona fide starter that is going to start, a la someone like Teddy Bridgewater, who's getting $20 million a year for Carolina, and he might not be their long-term starter, but that's starter money for someone who hasn't had a ton of experience lately. So I look at it in that sense, and what really is kind of a hindrance to the Saints' ability to gauge who might be next is the fact that Jameis Winston may never play a down in a real game setting, preseason and regular season, in a Saints uniform, because the preseason's wiped away. That's where you wanted to really see him play. And the only time Jameis Winston is going to play would be in victory formation situation, because if he's playing legitimate snaps, that means Drew Brees is hurt, because I look at him as a Teddy Bridgewater type, that he will be the guy, even if you think Taysom's going to be the hit guy next year, he would be the guy this year, and Taysom would continue to play his role as the jack of all trades. But I'm going into this assuming that this is his last year, but hey, it's up to Drew. Drew can make that decision, and they're not going to if he's still playing well, there's no way they're going to bump him out the door. And even if he's slacking a little bit, I don't see them bumping him out the door just because of where he stands in the lore of this franchise.
I concur with that and most everything you said, for that matter. So I guess we spend too much time around each other. What the heck? All good.
I think so.
I'm trying to find anything I can poke a hole in, but I just pretty much agree with everything you said. Erich and I were on the same page. But then I think that a lot of people would say that because this is a pretty clear-cut football team. I think that's why these draft picks are going to make the team. We know that. Emmanuel Sanders is a very important big pickup. We know that. The question about McCoy and Ruiz is there, but they're both going to start. We know that. And then defensively, are they going to be good enough? Which is exactly what we were saying in 2009, in 2011, and in 2018, if not 19 as well, all of which were years that the Saints very clearly could have won it all.
Yeah, I think at least defensively, I think they're in a good shape. We didn't really even talk about Janoris Jenkins, and to me, he is – I almost count him as a free agent pickup because he was picked up so late last season. I almost count him as a free agent pickup this offseason, and you can look at the way he played and just his numbers as far as pass breakups, interception, passer rating against when the ball's thrown at him. A lot of those numbers, he was better than Marshawn Lattimore last year. So if you have someone that is certainly capable in Janoris Jenkins, opposite of Marshawn Lattimore, you're in good shape. You have one of the better tandems in the NFL. I mean, and now we're just nitpicking at the nickel spot who's going to play there. So I do feel like, though, that the middle of that defensive line we need to take a look at. And, you did mention Trey Hendrickson. He's in a contract year, too, and he was definitely a serviceable number 3 guy. I don't think there's any doubt about that. He played dynamite in the last preseason and training camp, and he carried that over a lot in his snaps. And also Carl Granderson is someone that the Saints are still going to take a look at, young guy who made the team last year, edge guy. And so, but you're right. I think the offense gets back rolling. I think Alvin Kamara kind of comes back and is more the player we're used to seeing his first 2 years than the player we saw last year. That bumps the offense up. Jared Cook was getting rolling by the end of last year. Emmanuel Sanders is something that the Saints haven't had in a few years as a compliment to Mike Thomas. So, look, all these things are saying you're right. It's like a cut and dry thing. Like, it would be a shocker if the Saints were not good this year. I mean, I think the whole league would be stunned, and then it would really be like, okay, it's time to turn the page and really kind of move on from Drew Brees and really kind of start this thing, not from scratch, but kind of reboot it with Sean Payton kind of going and starting up a different era without Drew.
Follow him on Twitter at Larry Holder. And, of course, go to The Athletic to read the outstanding work that he does amongst the many contributors they have. Larry, listen, thank you so much for the time. Keep up the great work, and we look forward to talking about some real football here soon.
There you go, Ken. And don't forget, great minds think alike. So as your listeners should know, we have great minds. So there you go.
Right there with you, buddy. Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right, Ken. Good talking to you, buddy.
Okay. You got it, Larry.